All right, so a trick everyone knows already is you can double click our slides to make them bigger. And I would like to, 7:15, welcome everybody to our panel session on fiscal sponsorship for your event. Roll your own or seek one out. And what this means, what this is about, is if you're putting on an event with a group of people and you're going to need to pay for things, somebody's going to hold that money and facilitate that, and that's fiscal sponsorship. And that's either something your group is going to do for yourself, or you're going to partner with another group that's done that. And we've been through this and have really cool, not very overlapping stories to tell. I'll go ahead. I'll go first. And first, we'll each introduce ourselves, and then we'll each go into our stories after that. So I'm Kelly Albrecht, and I got my Twitter and my email up there. And I'm here representing New England Regional Developers, cool acronym NERD. And we are the fiscal sponsor currently for Design for Drupal, New England Drupal Camp Atlanta, and our very own Nerd Summit.
And I'm Kevin Foe. I'm president of the Midwest Open Source Alliance. Cool name, not as cool of an acronym. We go by Mosa. And we are fiscal sponsor for MidCamp, Twin Cities Drupal Camp, as well as local meetups and various initiatives.
And I'm Kirsten Burgard, and you can find me at Bendy Girl on GitHub or Bendy Girl at D.O. You can also email our group anytime at DrupalForGov@gmail. In addition to that, I am the executive director for Drupal for Gov Limited Liability Corporation. And we are a fiscal sponsor for Baltimore Camp, Drupal for Gov, which is our foundation name, as well as DrupalCon, which is our big conference.
So we're going to each kind of tell our story, why we are doing what we're doing, and kind of let that lead into how we decided how to go about it. And I'll go ahead and I'll start there. So we started the group of people mostly in Massachusetts. We wanted to do a Drupal camp. We did that for a few years. And at that time, one of the sponsors just held the money, and that was kind of awkward for accounting, and it just felt weird. And we knew that could be better. And so we knew we needed a fiscal sponsor, and the DA did it at that time. But around 2013, 2014, we kind of had this idea that we wanted to grow it into a larger thing. We wanted to attract people into the Drupal community, into the industry. I think at that time, around 2014, everybody was feeling this talent gap. There was a lot of talk about the talent gap. There was a lot of talk about, there were going to be so many software programming jobs by some date in the future, and that the universities were only going to produce so many people to fill those jobs. So there was a gap, and we were feeling that in terms of in our companies on our Drupal team. So we wanted to figure out, how do we get people to come to this Drupal camp? How do we lower the barrier to entry? So we thought one of the ways to lower the barrier to entry was to have it be a camp that wasn't just about Drupal. Just by having it be a Drupal camp made it, if you were not a Drupal person, this camp wasn't for you. So we wanted it to be about more general things, and Drupal would be what we thought at the time was the best option. And so we kind of had these bigger goals and partnership ideas with schools. And so having the Drupal Association be the fiscal sponsor at that time, it just seemed like it was going to be a bottleneck and kind of limiting in terms of our vision. So we knew we needed something bigger. And even with trying to partner with some of the schools, we knew that we needed to be more official. And we knew we started to think we needed our own 501c3. And we started looking into that. And that's why we went that direction.
Mosa got its start primarily from MidCamp. MidCamp, when we started as an event, we did use the DA as our fiscal sponsor. And it was a useful resource when you didn't have your own, but pretty early on in the process, we saw the need to kind of do things our own way, have a bit more control. And so the idea of forming a 501c3 we kicked around with mid-camp organizers for a few years before the DA officially ended their program. So when they did end their program, we already had done a lot of the groundwork. And at the time, when you used the DA as a fiscal sponsor, you contributed 10% of your revenue to them as a way to give back to the project and also cover their costs. And at the time, their suggestion was to move over to Open Collective as fiscal sponsor. In doing so, Open Collective would then take an additional 10% on starting a new account. And we just, between and they also didn't offer things that we had wanted from the DA, like insurance, things like that. So the idea of moving that way was just, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. So that's when we decided to do our own company and 501c3. And then when we did it, we figured if we can do this, kind of like my philosophy, if I can do this for one event, we can do this for many. That's why we decided to branch out and make sure that in our naming, we were kind of Midwest focused, because regions have different requirements, especially like Chicago has different sales tax requirements than other cities or states. So the idea that you could do one for the whole country was a little silly. So we decided we'd keep it Midwest, where we kind of have our own focus, but also open source, keep Drupal out of the name, so that way we could branch out.
So that brings us to me and Drupal for Gov. So the history is really long. We've been around since 2009. We're not new. So if you really want the whole long, drawn-out story, go to the link. I did a presentation last year at DrupalCon to give people a good history of what went into it, and why we are where we are. One of the basic needs that we had to fill was that we needed to have an easier way to pay our bills, from our events to our invoicing to even just taking in the money. We did try the Drupal Association. We had a fiscal sponsor from the Georgia Tech RI, which is GTRI. We also had one of our members also held the money. None of it worked real well. And that's kind of what brought us to needing to be a 501c3. We needed the accountability and the transparency, because we are hosted on government facilities and we have a lot of government employees. So we want to make it really clear what we provide, how we take in the money, and that there's no impropriety in between. We also needed to make Drupal for Gov more permanent. It was in order to be able to provide additional programming or to plan for our growth, and in addition to plan for our event and the organization to also cease to exist. If you're going to go into this, we went into this process not with just the idea that we would start a nonprofit, but rather, here's how we're going to start the nonprofit, and if and when we decide that we're no longer doing this, here's how we're going to take whatever money we have left and where it goes. The one thing that I would also like to mention is that you should always do your paperwork correctly the first time with the IRS, or you'll be a cautionary tale like we are. So don't be me. So let's talk about what's out there.
There we go. Yeah, so those were our stories. I will also kind of preface, we forgot to mention at the beginning, if you've got questions, we'll take them towards the end. Please preface your question in the chat with the word question, so they'll be easier to find. But yeah, so these are all the reasons why we started our own, but starting your own is a lot of work. So what happens if you want to see what's available? So there are a few options out there. I mentioned Open Collective. Events can use them as a fiscal sponsor. They contribute 10% in fees to Open Collective, in addition to then your credit card processor fees, your ticketing agent fees. So it's pricey, but it's an available option. They don't provide event insurance, so that's something to keep in mind. And then there's also existing event-focused 501c3 organizations, kind of like the three of us are represented right here. But outside of the U.S., there are local Drupal associations, which, depending on, there isn't really a good resource listing them all, especially stateside. Overseas, the local associations are listed on Drupal.org. So a lot of this is found through word of mouth.
N10 is also a really good resource. So if you're looking for that whole like nonprofit and technology piece, they have a lot of information that's available there.
Yeah, cool. And I guess if I could add anything about this slide, I did have some experience with other 501c3 organizations where the first kind of hurdle is what they do similar enough to what you do, because there are regulations about money flow and kind of consistency between types of 501c3s. And I think for us, really the biggest deal was, I think we were really gaining a lot of momentum in terms of our vision and our self-organization and our volunteerism, and it just really felt like to have a kind of like a third party be your mechanism, your organizational mechanism, just felt like a drag. We felt like we could do it, so we kind of shied away from that one, from another 501c3. So in that kind of segue, we ended up looking into it, and there's a lot of information out there on Google, and it didn't look too bad to do it. So we went ahead, and I mean, really, some of the pros, we like for our vision, forming our own thing gave us greater control of our vision, let us feel more like an entity, the entity that we were as a group of people with a shared goal, and there was more flexibility in how we operate, which that also came with some additional cons. Like there are a lot of responsibilities that I'm looking forward to handing off as we continue to grow. We've got about 30 core volunteers right now, but I'm really looking forward to continuing to kind of grow as an organization and hand off some of those responsibilities, share some of that load there. But it's a little bit of a con right now, but the pros are worth it for us.
And for Drupal for Gov, our top priority was the transparency from budgets to our risk factors, whether it was FACA, which is a rule that governs how government employees create working groups, or there are establishments of meetings with non-government entities. We also had the other legal risks related to the IRS, the requirements for creating a state entity. There was a lot of available risks, and when you're taking in money and you're spending it, there are inherently financial risks and liabilities that you have to consider. So on top of all of that, we added additional financial risks, and which moved us to obtaining board insurance for all of our board members, so that when money comes in, if there's any questions, we actually have insurance for our board members, so that they can't be sued or that sort of thing. And that takes us then to Kevin.
Yeah, and I think, as I've mentioned a few times now, lower fees for events is a high priority for Mosa. We do currently request a 5% donation from events with the intent of lowering that once we get established. Because let's face it, events just don't have a whole lot of cash. And then we also wanted the ability to support the community, whether that's, like example, there are interesting initiatives that are happening that don't have easy ways to transfer money, so we can take them under our parent organization and facilitate that. But then, of course, we're all event organizers, so the idea of having your own company involves all this paperwork, because now you've got to establish priorities, processes, contracts, all that fun stuff that we all don't have time to do.
Yeah, I've got a little list of annual things to do for nerd. It's not hard stuff, but it's every once in a while I like have a flash of like, wait, did I do that? Did I do that this year?
Or is it? Am I late?
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, a lot of that stuff is pretty lenient for nonprofits because it's a nonprofit is like nobody owns it. There isn't like ownership or shareholders. So I've been pretty late on some things, and it's more like if you're late on something for 2 consecutive years, they'll consider you're non-existent. So it's a lot more lenient, and I haven't really come across any fine situations. I do want to call out, though, what became a little hobby of mine as a pro is once you're a 501c3 and you get that determination letter, that is like your ticket to a lot of free licensing and software products. And it's just like a habit for me now. Every time I find a new little product, it's just like, ooh, product.
It's the nonprofit rate.
Product name and nonprofit. What do they got? What do they got going on here? So there's a lot of stuff. So yeah, lots of pros and cons. And I do want to say, as we're getting into some of these next slides, somebody did put a question in the chat, and they started it with the letter Q. That's super helpful. We've talked. Panelists have talked about this. I forget. Did we wanted to scroll through and grab the questions after? We wanted to get through.
Yeah, we'll hit them at the end because we're not going to go the full time, so we can kind of open up more discussion.
Cool. So yeah, so the Q in front of the question is super helpful for that. So thanks for that. That actually reminded me that that's what we wanted to say. So if like us, you've thought it through and you're thinking about looking into forming, you've got some steps to take here for forming the your nonprofit. I forget what our strategy for the slide was going to be.
We're not going to explain.
We're not going to explain everything.
We're just going to kind of touch on some successes and challenges we've each had.
And what's really important is that in each different jurisdiction, you're going to have different rules, whether you're in Canada or you're in Maryland. They're going to be different rules. And a lot of these things are not just steps, but actually things that we've all run into, either because we've done them imperfectly, not wrong, but imperfectly, or we've noticed that we need to upgrade some of those things. So I will turn it back over to Kelly and Kevin to talk about any specific considerations that they'd like to mention.
Well, I know that for me, there in my research and applying for a 501c3, there are certain things that you need to get right, and it seems to just go right through. But everything else can be kind of like a work in progress. Like I'd say that our bylaws and our election structure, our annual reporting, that kind of stuff, I think could definitely improve. But it's not like you don't have to have like this whole bulletproof organization and business plan before you start. You can really apply with the minimums and get there.
Yeah, and I would definitely say seek professional advice. Mosa does not yet have a lawyer. We do not yet have an accountant. So we sweat a little bit with every decision that we make. But there is documentation out there. Just to grain us up, like we needed, our annual meeting was the other week, and we had a vacancy, so we had to have an election to fill that vacancy. It's like, great. How do you do this? Check your bylaws. Great. Elections are in our bylaws, but not how. So then now you kind of get down a rabbit hole of, seemed easy at the time, but it's a whole lot more to it. And things like sales tax. This kind of bugged me since the beginning, because everyone's like, oh, the DA's a 501c3, or we have a 501c3, so you don't pay sales tax. Well, Chicago doesn't think that way. You pay sales tax unless you have a sales tax exemption status, which you can't get until you've operated for a full year and can show your financials and then prove to the city that you are a charitable organization. So there's a whole lot of considerations to take because while you can do it, now you've kind of created this thing that you now must. I'm a president of a corporation, which is terrifying to think of, and now you've created this living, breathing entity that other people are ideally depending on if you've become successful.
And of course, we're all successful, so. Except the cautionary tale over there.
Yeah, the local sales tax thing is a thing that finds a new way to trip me up every other year. It's first it's a state thing, and then trying to and a lot of times, like if you're paying for a service, they charge you tax, and you think, oh, I'm a nonprofit, I shouldn't have to pay tax. And then you ask them, can you remove this? And it's like every time they want me to send them a different state form. Like in Massachusetts, there's an ST2 and there's also an ST5. And they're like, you need to send them a recent one. And I'm just like always sending the wrong one. And it's like usually to save like $2.16. Like I'm 30 minutes into this task. I'm like, why am I doing this?
Yeah, that's ridiculous. But like we could save $9,000 on catering for new campaign.
Yeah.
Just in sales tax.
So, I mean, some of the outcomes, we talked a little bit about the pros and cons, and I think we were just talking about some of the like extra kind of chores that you get. But I think overall, it's really cool to like have an official organization. We've been able to be fiscal sponsors for other camps. That's been a really cool way to, to contribute back. I don't do much coding anymore, so it is really cool to stay involved and help the other camps happen. And just in general, it feels like we're better, able to facilitate a broader community as this official umbrella. And we're essentially operating as a business. We're not just like, storing our funds in someone's account. We actually have funds, and we run it, more as a business. And it seems like for whatever reason, it seems like, since we started doing it this way or being more serious about it, we've built up financial reserves, and we've sponsored other camps. We've sponsored other groups trying to, do things in the community, like different hackathons. And so that's been really cool to do. And I feel like it's a lot of why we've been able to attract better and broader keynotes and more volunteers. Like I said a little while ago, we've got probably about 30 strong core volunteers, and it just feels like an organization, and it's really cool. It feels like one of the things that Kirsten was mentioning with secession. I feel like it feels like it has more of a life of its own, which I think is important for if I need to relax out of it. A lot of the other organizers, like Rick Hood, does a lot of stuff. I feel like it's not just hinging on me, but yes, it's been really cool all those little chores are worth it. Are worth all that.
For Mosa, we're still kind of young and scrappy. Our primary function right now is pretty much moving money for events. And the intent, though, is to kind of, now that we've got that taken care of, now let's, we have our framework and we have an action plan. We've got our GitHub project board, which lists out all the things that we need to do, which is great. So we've not crashed and burned. We are able to manage the funds for also additional initiatives through a collective, and intend to grow once we get some of our processes formalized.
So that brings us to Drupal for Gov. We are still processing the paperwork for the 501c3. I'm just waiting on a single form that, unfortunately, I'm still waiting on the state of Maryland to send me because of COVID. Okay. We expect to actually be able to offer additional fiduciary support outside of the state of Maryland, starting sometime in 2021. So if you're a camp and you're thinking about asking one of the three of us to help support you with your accounting, I think you should just reach out to one of us. The other hints and suggestions that I have is to ensure your board members. I can't recommend this enough. I've said this already a couple of times, and I've said it directly to both Kelly and to Kevin. It's really important to have board member insurance so that you can take away some of that liability from your board members, since you're going to be making some financial decisions. Additionally, highly recommend Wave for accounting program. Thanks to Texas Camp for suggesting it. It's been just tremendous for us. We do all of our accounting through Wave, and it's free. So it's much easier for us to do the invoicing, to take in payments, to manage our PNC account that way. Additionally, regularly schedule your meetings and elections. I cannot say this enough. My daughter who normally runs our registration desk at GovCon, is putting together, she's a board member now too. She's elected to the board. She's putting together a plan for us for regular quarterly meetings and additional elections, starting with our annual meeting, which is held during GovCon, which will be online this year. My last suggestion, based on speaking with Kevin and Kelly about this event, is to shop around for a bank account. I cannot stress that one enough too, because I learned a lot about how easy it is to support other camps based on the bank account that you have, and that you can actually get interest from some of these guys. Ours does not. So we'll be looking into that soon too.
Yeah, I'll just throw I guess before we jump to this next slide, I'll add that well, there is a question about credit cards. That's why it's on my mind. But with bank accounts, one of the things that we're looking into is this service Divvy, which I think Colleen Clarkson recommended to us, that he's either used it in the past or he was looking into it in the past. And Divvy will let you set up budgets for individual groups and have them use the credit cards for those budgets. And what that lets you do is have a single bank account with all the funds, and you basically configure each camp's budget separate from those funds, and then you can keep that lump of funds in like an interest-bearing savings account or better. So when you start thinking like running, get Divvy.
I'm sorry.
So I think once you start running like a nonprofit and you're running it like a business, you can start like doing things like this, so it'll help its own sustainability. So COVID-19 and the new normal. So I think as we're all here and doing DrupalCon this new way, we're not going to stop meeting and learning together. So no matter what the new normal ends up being, there, in a sense, even though the nature and the needs of a fiscal sponsor are going to change, if we're not paying an event or we're not paying catering, those things are going to change. But I think there's still cause for having an organization for the group recognize itself as an organization. And so it's still, I think the pros and cons are still relevant there. So we'll probably still be doing virtual events more, I think. And a lot of people probably experienced a lot of these pros and cons at this DrupalCon. And I think other than if anybody wants to talk about these, or we're curious what your questions are too. And what do you guys, panelists, think? Should we go into the questions?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think so. Let me put up there. Thank you. Here we go.
And to be honest, like, we've got 15 minutes left, so even if you want to hit that terrifying red button asking to share your video, like, hop on, let's just chat.
Yeah. So I think the first question is there a good place to incorporate, or is it all pretty much the same from state to state for nonprofits? So I did it in Massachusetts, and it was very easy. It was just submit a form.
Yeah, Illinois was also really easy to incorporate. Like, we didn't think to incorporate wherever then, like, we're nonprofits, so I don't think usually you incorporate
Delaware
because of taxes or something like that. Not an issue for a nonprofit, but yeah, just follow your local requirements, and then once you have that nonprofit corporation, you go federal. And like we had people telling us, oh, it's going to take years. It'll take a really long time to get your federal 501c3. Andrea on our team, she mailed it in. We got our letter
You need
a week.
Yeah, you
I'm
need
very jealous of Kelly and Kevin. So there's that.
you need your employee identification number, your EIN from federal. That's really easy to get. I can't even remember what the process was. It was just you just kind of click through some of the federal forms and you have one all of a sudden. And then you can plug that in. Instead of using your social, you can use that as your applying for more things and filling out more paperwork.
But you need that for your bank account. So
yeah,
you've got an account under your corporation name versus your.
Yep. Yeah, those are kind of the steps. Get that EIN, and then you can get a bank account and not use your social. Although I have found that the banks still find out who you are.
Of course.
And they still treat you like you own the bank account.
Yeah, and oddly enough, like even though it's a financial institution, they don't acknowledge treasurer as at least Chase doesn't acknowledge treasurer as a valid board or corporation member role to open an account.
Wow.
Yeah. Weird.
That's
thing.
good to know. we have PNC, and our rule required us to become a LLC within Maryland because we're a Maryland corporation. And most of the board members are actually in the district, so it worked out better for us that way. But John, your second question, the answer is yes.
Yeah, I'm asking so much questions.
That was our problem as well. One of the reasons that
is the second question the credit cards that say tax exempt.
Oh, I was
technically yes.
Requirements, taxes, and stuff.
That's number 3.
All right, let's go to the second one. I'll handle number 3 later.
There you go. Because I need to know this.
I don't think there are. I think that's something you have to work out with every vendor. You have to.
That's my understanding too.
Yeah, so you end up purchasing you end up establishing nonprofit relationships with vendors.
Yeah, and so you would get a credit card, or once you get the invoice, or even before then, say, oh, by the way, we're tax exempt versus nonprofit, because that tax exempt means we don't have to pay your sales taxes or the
like I know that somewhere like Best Buy,
you need a certificate for that.
Like somewhere like Best Buy, they'll give you a card that then you can bring that card in. Like it's not a credit card, but it's like they'll give you some kind of card that you go and you just show that to them, so you don't have to bring your tax exempt form every time.
Yeah, I've seen the cards, and I'm not lucky enough to carry a purchasing card for Iowa State, but their P cards do have that little tax exempt thing on there. I'm like,
that's true. My government
do anything
as well.
Yeah,
interesting.
I don't know if it does anything or what. It probably just reminds you to ask for the discount.
Yeah, well, some vendors might if it's like a state school or something, maybe there's a little more leniency in what you have to prove to the business for them to feel. I mean, they just won't charge. They just won't charge you the tax, and then they don't pass that on to the state. So it's really like it's on them to feel okay about it, because if they get it wrong, then they're defrauding the state of tax money. But if whatever they need to trust your organization shouldn't be charged tax, that's where you're at with that, I guess.
Then I'm moving on to the third question, also from John. Reporting requirements, taxes and stuff, get a little more strict after a certain revenue, and the answer is yes. We hit that, which is one of the reasons that our paperwork was also declined. So I believe the threshold at the time that we originally applied was 40,000, and we take in usually between $60,000 and $70,000 a year. So unfortunately, we hit the first threshold and required full package. But if you're under a certain threshold, you can do it online. One of you actually did it online, right?
We
we
definitely did.
Yeah, we have been able to do it online. I think if we added another camp to our to be the fiscal sponsor of, I think that would push us over the threshold, and we'd have to hire an accountant to do like a tax package every year.
Way to go, Andrea! Woo-hoo.
Yeah, Andrea did a whole lot of legwork for the beginning of Mosa. And continues. She's our treasurer, who had to represent as acting secretary in order to open a bank account. even the bank person was a little flummoxed that we couldn't use a treasurer because you need 2 officers in order to open the account. Silly.
Well,
yeah, is it different per state maybe because the nonprofit that we have. Yeah. So yeah, we've got a different nonprofit that we get our fiscal sponsorship through. So
yeah, you use what, the James
Gang?
The James
Gang. Yeah, it's a local organization for community projects.
Very cool.
So yeah, it's kind of like a nonprofit incubator. Is probably the best way I would describe it. I don't know if there would be others around the country or wherever that could do that, but I don't know if there's a good way to find them or what.
It totally depends. But like I have a question for you because I know Jersey Camp uses Software Conservancy as their fiscal sponsor, and I know they experienced a few bumps in the road the first time around because that was their first event that they've ever dealt with, so they didn't know about insurance and all these other things or travel expenses, to reimburse when people come. So I'm curious, John, if your organization has had issues or if they've already done events before, are kind of accustomed to the uniqueness of that.
Yeah, being a community organization, there's a lot of events that these people do. So the James Gang is it's sort of like your Mosa model, right? Where you have one organization, then you have what they call them endeavors. So DrupalCon is an endeavor. Iowa Tech Chicks is an endeavor. Antelope Lending Library is an endeavor. And
they lend antelopes to people?
No, I don't know where the antelope comes from, but it's like a bookmobile, It's a book. Yeah. It's a library on wheels. So that's a really cool thing. So they bought like a $30,000 Winnebago or whatever to have it converted.
Nice.
So it's really good because all these people, they have events. So when we came around, they already had an event insurance. They already had an accountant. They already had a lawyer. They already had, the nonprofit, and they had a system with the local bank, which they could probably do better because they don't actually have a branch in my town, so it's kind of a pain. So I've been doing everything by mail, and every endeavor has to be on the board.
Yeah, that's how we handle Mosa. If you're event, you become an at-large board member.
And does each endeavor get its own bank account?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but it has to stay at the same bank so that the treasurer of the nonprofit can keep an eye on things.
Yeah.
Right. Because you don't really
want Chase, and so that can all be managed online. We did find out that there's no Chase in Minneapolis, which there are Chases in Minnesota, but none in Minneapolis. So when we took on TC Drupal, luckily some of the organizers who were attending mid camps were like, "Hey, let's run over to the bank and get you your debit card." Because once you have it, then it doesn't matter because you just have things online.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely fill out the survey too.
Yes.
So yeah, so they had all the stuff we needed, and the way it works is, we have we have monthly meetings to keep everybody apprised of what's going on and what our needs are, and that also helps cross-pollinate ideas and stuff between the endeavors.
Yep.
So there's really good, resources there. So if somebody's like, oh well, where do we, I'm gonna bring up Wave and Get Divi at the next meeting, because I hadn't heard about these, and they would totally help with this nonprofit. So
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm so
here we set a budget. They see what their expenses are going to be. How much does the lawyer, accountant, insurance, and all that stuff mean? They do have board insurance too. That made me happy when they bought that. And they just evenly split the expected cost amongst the endeavors, and so it turns out to be like $250 or $300 a year.
Does it get cheaper as more endeavors come online?
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, then,
I mean, that's a good model.
It
Makes
depends,
sense.
right? Because expenses might go up if you get more endeavors,
Sure,
right?
sure.
If you need to have more accounting time or more lawyering or whatever.
But it's sort of
like Henry would be like talking too, because you keep putting all these great chats in there. You're the only one reading them.
So yeah, I see Andrea saying I should probably join Mosa, and that's tempting, but you don't have all the things yet.
Yeah, it sounds like, wait, spoiler alert, you have way more than we can give you right now.
And
But
for
we intend
cheaper,
to get
so.
there. We intend to get there. And yeah, we're asking 5% now, just kind of get seed money so that we can get the accountant at the lawyer.
Yeah, that's hard. Yeah, if you're not already established, there's too much variables.
Yeah, we don't yet know our operating costs fully, because until we get that lawyer, until we get that account, we don't know what we need to take in per year to keep the lights on.
Yeah, and 5% is reasonable, I think.
I forget, because we haven't taken on a new camp in a while, but we were just doing a flat fee based on.
I'm the treasurer. Wait, no.
Yeah.
No. Andrea is our treasurer, and she's pointing out that she thinks she's a big slacker. Her words, not mine.
Yeah, I always get nervous looking through the books.
And here's the one who came up to say hello.
Hi, Kitty.
See, there would be cats.
Excellent.
So is there any other questions from anybody other than me? I kind of...
No.
No, this is great. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, he's great.
All right.
Well, I guess we're done
To
then.
wrap it up. All right. Thank you all.
Don't forget to
do your survey.
feedback.
Yeah, and for sure, if you have an event or know of an event that needs help, reach out. I know Flyover Camp, they started their own nonprofit, 501c3, and I said, keep in mind, like, we have our intent is to grow. So it's great that you have this. If you ever decide you don't want it anymore, you have an option if you choose to dissolve it to work with us.
It's nice to have options.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.